Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Lights, camera, and action. As we celebrate Women's History Month, we spotlight the powerhouse women shaping the arts, specifically the performing arts. The Washington National Opera is making its 70th anniversary season at a new venue and with a power pack of spring storytelling featuring some of the best and the brightest. We are going to preview some of the shows. We're also going to talk with the internationally acclaimed women whose voices are shaping opera today. And this is a conversation about artistry, legacy, and the women leading one of the world's most powerful art forms through voice, courage, and vision. Joining me to talk about this are Janae Bridges, two-time Grammy Award-winning mezzo-soprano, and is now starring as Elizabeth Proctor in The Crucible, Denise Graves, mezzo-soprano director of Tremonisha, and also joining us, Francesca Zambello, WNO artistic director as well as director of The Crucible. Ladies, thank you so much for joining this conversation. It certainly is an honor to have all of you here with us.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here, Harold.
Sure thing. So let's first talk about, the Washington National Opera, what it takes and what it means to remain vibrant and relevant for, oh my goodness, 7 decades. I know, Francesca, this is a pivotal point for the opera right now.
Yes, that's putting it politely, I guess. We're in a time of transition. We departed from the Kennedy Center because we chose to leave there because of a number of things that had been put upon us that we were not in agreement with. And so we have struck out, and we are, in a sense, building an opera company and trying to run it and fly it and perform like a plane all at the same time. But it's going very well, in part because of these two amazing colleagues that are here with me, Denise and Janae. And I think our spring repertory is really, really exciting with Scott Joplin's Tremonisha, The Crucible, based on the famous Arthur Miller Award-winning play. And later we will have West Side Story in Baltimore at the Lyric Opera of Baltimore. So it's like a celebration of America, and we're putting the Kennedy Center behind us and moving forward.
I do want to, first of all, congratulate Janae on your Grammy.
Thank you.
That in the words of the streets, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it is a whole thing, and it's still hitting me. I mean, I feel like, it's one of the highest honors, and yeah, it has me on a high. So I'm grateful for that moment, and I'm really excited to be here with WNO for this transitional period. We're all in it together, so very much looking forward to it.
But and I appreciate you being humble about it, but you've done it twice. This is your second Grammy. You are two-fisted in
Yeah,
in this.
it's I think for me it is just encouraging. I'm encouraged. I'm inspired to continue to use my voice on and off stage, to create change, opportunity for people that look like me to see themselves winning Grammys in classical music. So I'm really excited just for the future of opera. I think there's often a conversation that, surrounds itself by saying, oh, opera is dying, opera's dead. No, we are very much alive, and we're here. And seasons such as this at WNO in an incredibly important time are living proof that we are here, we're not going anywhere. And for me, it's throughout all of the chaos, I'm inspired. I really am inspired.
Denise, to her point about opera not going anywhere. First of all, let me say again, this is an honor this is a goosebump moment for me to have an opportunity to talk to you. You are a household name, even for people who are not familiar with opera, who may not necessarily have an appreciation for that classical music genre. They know you. But just like in the Grammy Awards uh, last month, and when you received yours in 2021, we don't get to see those awards. We see, rock and country and all of those other kinds of categories, but we don't see, I watched the Grammys. I didn't see Janae Bridges receive her award. uh, what are your thoughts about the fact that we often don't see them during the broadcast, that we have to dig, we have to search, and what does that do as it relates to exposure to people who otherwise may not see it?
Well, Harold, I first want to say it's a delight to be here. I am born and raised in Washington, D.C., and the Daily Drum and your name in particular are ones that are very familiar. So it's a delight to be here, and it's a delight to share this moment with two beautiful colleagues whom I adore and admire. Um, there's a lot of wonderful music making that's happening all over the globe all the time. And one of the things, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for having us, because you're being able to amplify the work that we're doing are one of the venues that help get what we do out there, right? I think if I can say such a thing, I think that probably one of the reasons that I'm known, certainly in America a lot, is because the work that I've done has gone outside of the classical music arena a bit. And so I think that what we heard Janae say and the work that Francesca's been doing this whole time has been about, really getting outside of a box and a perception of what people think that opera is. It is a question, I think, of education, a question of exposure. And so that's why it's such a beautiful thing what Washington National Opera is doing, what a lot of opera is doing across the globe, in terms of educational outreach, in terms of making sure that we really get and we bring this beautiful art form to so many different communities. So shows like this help. Anytime that we have the opportunity to speak about what it is we do is important. I think that there have been some artists other names that we have known that have sort of gotten outside into the mainstream arena. Certainly at the time that we had the three tenors, that was something that sort of permeated, the general culture. And I think that, there's a tremendous amount of stereotype and perception around what classical music is and what opera is. And so I think that if people, I in more than 45 years of singing on the stage, the thing that I heard most often from people coming backstage was, "This is my first opera, and it's nothing like I thought it was going to be." Phrase that you hear so very often. And so I just want to encourage people to come out to see Tremonisha for sure on March 7th, March 8th, and March 15th. Also the Crucible and all the beautiful work that's being done at the Washington National Opera. And the Metropolitan Opera has this HG telecast that you can watch on your own time. And so there's a lot of opera that's being done often, that if you have the curiosity and interest to explore, you might be very, very surprised at how much of it you already know, and how much of it you have heard on television, in movies, in film, in video games. My God, my son was a big video game player, and you could hear it all the time. And so it's permeated our lives. It's around us everywhere, and it's just a question of being exposed to it.
Yeah. And speaking of exposure, Francesca, there's a great big spring season coming up. And I know there's a lot that you want to share. So please kind of give us the rundown of those who are curious, and for those who are really looking forward to the spring season. This is something that they they try to see every year, the opera fans?
Sure. Well, we had originally planned this season as a celebration for 2026 for the semi-sesquicentennial. And I'm thrilled that in a way, they're pieces that each have a big message. We are opening at Listener Hall, where the company started 70 years ago on the George Washington campus. We opened there on March 7th with Scott Joplin's opera Treemonisha, directed by Denise, in a brand new version, in a way, new orchestrations by Damian Sneed, with a phenomenal cast. And it was really important to me, this work, because I always felt like it was one of those like operas that like sort of almost worked. But now with this cast, with the new orchestrations and a book by Kyle Bass, who has in a way dramaturgically sewn it together, I think it's an amazing celebration of Joplin's music. It's a very powerful statement about a young Black girl after slavery who is educated and becomes the leader of her community. And so I think that it's one of those things that I just am amazed that we are going to be pulling off now. Right in repertoire with that, just opening right after on the 21st of March is The Crucible, based on the Arthur Miller award-winning play, and the opera itself won a Pulitzer Prize. It's very romantic, lush music. It's not clunkety clunk, pots and pans, modern music at all. It's totally accessible. If you are a fan of American history, both of these works really speak. And The Crucible, of course, is so relevant today. It was an allegory for the McCarthy era, for the Red Scare, and it's really about standing up and having integrity. And so Janae plays Elizabeth Proctor. Ryan McKinney, amazing singing actor, plays her husband, John Proctor. And it's about the Salem witch trials, but it's really about, in a way, so many things today, about due process, about the right to attorneys, about just so many things that we are witnessing on our streets every single day. And it speaks volumes in this piece. And the same thing coming right after that will be West Side Story, which, although written 70 years ago, is so much about immigration and about those who have a right to be here, and the insiders and the outsiders. And so these three works I think of as an American triptych. I think of as, Joplin, Arthur Miller, Robert Ward, and Leonard Bernstein, Stephen Sondheim. They wrote these pieces, and we're interpreting them now with these phenomenal artists on stage and off stage. So these are all works, they're basically not to be missed. And as Denise was saying, like, if you've never been to an opera, this is the moment to come to an opera. I would not miss any of them. So you can catch us at Listener Hall for Treemonisha or The Crucible, and come to Baltimore, the Lyric Opera, this beautiful theater. So I'm thrilled that we're going to be there. And then we're also doing 2 performances of West Side at Strathmore. So these women can tell you more about everything we're doing. I'm going to scoot out of this, but Harold, please send people to us. Now is the moment to support what we're doing and to make art, make people understand how art is so important. Whoever is over there in that building over there, they cannot crush us. They cannot crush the arts. We have the most powerful voices. And I have to say, I love it a little bit that we're speaking on March 2nd, which is like a pivotal day. It's sort of like it's really February 29th. So it's still Black History Month, but it's also Women's Month. So I'm like, we're all together on this. So I love that. You're with 2 of my favorite women. And these are like super powerhouses. So,
absolutely.
Harold, I'll be waiting for you at these things. I'm going to scoot now, and thank you for your help.
Francesca Zambello, thank you so much. Continue to be a powerful voice for women, for the Washington National Opera, and for arts, not just in DC, but across the country and around the world. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Sure. Ladies, that I was so glad that we had an opportunity to hear from Francesca. I have so many more questions that I want to ask the both of you about your careers, about your place in women's history, Black history, but I am going to take a quick break and we'll come back. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about women in the arts and the Washington National Opera. My guests are Janae Bridges, two-time Grammy Award-winning mezzo-soprano. She is now starring as Elizabeth Proctor in The Crucible. And of course, Denise Graves, mezzo-soprano, Grammy Award winner, and director of Treemonisha. Ladies, I want to go back and just talk about, and I'll start with you, Denise. Do you have a full sense of your place in Black history and women's history? I know sometimes artists are so consumed with the work that sometimes they don't realize how important they are to the broader community.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, first of all. I would say
But
that
it's true. It's very true.
Thank you. Thank you. I just came back from the Lake Nona Impact Forum conference where I was speaking. And what I hear all the time are, and more actually, is my father sang with you. I first learned about you in the first grade. I saw you on Sesame Street. I said, these are the sort of things that I'm hearing often. And so I don't think that any of us really can fully appreciate the impact of what our legacy may be, because it's still very much in process. I mean, I'm still working. I've just made an enormous pivot from singing now to directing and running my foundation. So that takes up a lot of my time currently. But I'm hearing all the time from people, I had no idea. And people still say, which comes as a surprise to me, but they still say, I'm singing because I saw you do this or I saw you do that. And I had no idea that there was someone who looked like me. I am still hearing that in 2026, that yours was the first face that looked like mine that I saw on the stage, that inspired me and that let me know that I could, in fact, pursue this and be successful at that. So I think that the work still continues. There's obviously a lot of work to be done yet. Still, we're still having a lot of firsts of many different things. And we need people out there at a very, very high level. And we're seeing that. I mean, when I first started the career, the landscape looks very, very different now from when I first started. And it's populated with really, really a lot of beautiful African-American men and women and all sorts of people of color in many different areas, and on both sides of the proscenium arch, in on the stage, but also directing, conducting, in positions of leadership in arts organizations. So I'm very, very encouraged to see that sort of thing happening.
Did you ever feel alone?
Sure, and I still do. But that may be part of the human experience, but yeah, sure. I mean, but I think that we are very fortunate in that, having grown up with certainly this will be maybe my story much more than Janae's, where oftentimes you were the only person in the room. You grew up with a certain sensibility and a certain thickness of skin that one has to develop, where you just, you walk through the front door and you know that you belong there, and you pull up a chair at the seat of the table, and so that's what I'm seeing much, much more now. So I was never one that felt that I didn't belong in the space, even though I may have been the only one there, and that happened certainly a lot in the very beginning of my career. I was never intimidated by that, or I never felt lonesome in that sense. I mean, you can be with a bunch of people and feel lonesome, right? But so I'm not quite sure. I think that what you mean is in the profession,
Yes.
No, right. But I mean, obviously, like we're not a monolith, and sometimes there could be another person in the room, and you can be very, very far apart from that individual as well. But sure, there were, in the beginning and still now, there are many, many spaces that I go into where I'm the only one who looks like me, but I'm never worried. I thank God for it, and thank God for all of the opportunity to be able to speak to that. But I think that probably even more than speaking to it is just the power of just seeing the face, the power of the presence there, just the power of just seeing someone. I mean, I grew up in the era when, we'd be outside playing, and if there was a Black family that came on Family Feud, like we all ran into the house to turn on the
Yeah.
television.
Well, then there's that.
Right. And so there is, right. And so, but I always felt like, I grew up in my father was a minister. I grew up in a very, very strong faith-based environment where we were taught, my brother, my sister, myself, we were taught that we were supposed to be here, that we were called to this moment, that our presence and what it is that we have to offer to wherever we find ourselves is needed. And so I never felt like that whatever people thought about me or think about me was never any of my business. I was never concerned with what they thought about. I was there doing the work that I was doing. And so, and again, there's still much work to be done yet still.
Janae, I saw a lot of head nodding when Denise was talking. Your thoughts about what she was just sharing?
Yes, I mean, I share a lot of the same sentiments. I am from Tacoma, Washington, the other Tacoma and the other Washington.
The other side of the world. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I grew up in private schools. I was usually the only Black girl and person of color, really, frankly. So that was my normal. However, I grew up in the Black church, a very, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud family. So I, much like Denise, have always felt a sense of pride in who I am. And I was always taught by my parents that, if someone talks about my skin or shows any type of prejudice, that is really their problem. And at the end of the day, they're talk either, maybe they might say something that's a little bit off or ignorant or make a comment on my appearance, which has happened many times. But for me, I almost take it as a compliment. Like you must really like me or just be interested, because you're not focused on what you really need to be focused on. So I've never felt alone. Maybe sometimes I've felt a little bit, how can I say? I'm not really sure how to say this actually, but sometimes there have been moments where I'm like, I don't want to be perceived as an angry Black woman, because that is a very realistic, unfortunate
trope.
Yeah, exactly. Trope. So for me, it's not if I do have an issue, I'm not coming to the issue as a Black woman. I'm coming to the issue as an artist, firstly, a human that wants to be respected. And we're coming at the issue, not as, well, this Black woman said, like, that's, to me, I don't lead with that. However, I have a lot of pride in being a Black woman, but I think, I don't step into a room the first day of rehearsal saying, I'm a Black woman, I have to prove myself. I'm here and I deserve to be here. So, there have moments, but I personally, I resort to what is the issue. And if it's a very blatant, racist, I'll just say frankly, kind of aimed issue, then that's another thing. And I have to say that I don't feel like I've dealt with that a lot. But even if there is a moment where I feel like, is it because I'm Black? Then I have learned how to approach that in a respectful way, and in a usually private way. I think that things are mostly effective when they're communicated privately. But all that to say, when there is another Black person in the room, for me, I automatically feel a sense of comfort. I just do. And that's not for everyone. Like Denise said, we're not a monolith. But for instance, in the Crucible, so it's quite a diverse cast, and it feels safe. It feels good. It feels like we are representing, first of all, America and telling the story as Americans, but also different perspectives. We all come with different backgrounds and different lenses. And so I think the more diverse, the more represented of a room, an audience, a cast that you have, the more interesting, because we all come from such different backgrounds. So I take who I am as a Black woman with the utmost pride. It's not a defect at all. And whenever I go into either do like master classes or residencies, there's always a question from there's typically a question from one of the Black artists saying, how have you done this? How do you ever feel lonely? And I explain what I've just explained to you, and I encourage them to just stand in their power and in their truth, because we are more than enough. And this art form is for everybody.
Well, it sounds to me like something that, even I've experienced, although my in my news career, because the only singing I really do is in the shower. But where you encounter a situation where there is racism, there's prejudice, and then there is ignorance.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking about addressing things privately, sometimes those are teachable moments, and sometimes you don't know where a person may be coming from, and sometimes when you, as the expert on being a Black woman, have an opportunity to give them a teachable moment of, oh, I didn't know that, hey, that's why I'm here, kind of situation. But the other thing I want to talk about, specifically Black culture, Denise, because at the risk of being considered, elitist or bougie, or however you want to put it. And I know you have experienced this. And here's the context for me. The first opera that I ever saw was Porgy and Bess as a child, but I didn't know that it was opera. It was my parents taking me to see in my mind as a child, a musical. Okay. And not even realizing as a very, very young child how important Porgy and Bess was and still is. Obviously, that's where you received your 2021 Grammy. But then I went to see Madame Butterfly on my own as a much younger man, because I'm just curious. But for members of the culture, Black culture, that are wholly unfamiliar with opera, talk to me about the perception, and I think you touched on this earlier, about making it more accessible to Black people.
So thank you for that. I just would like to piggyback and address two things that you mentioned. First of all, this is exactly what we want to hear. When we bring people to the Opera House for the first time, you went to see Porgy and Bess, and then you came back on your own, right? And this is exactly what we hope happens, and what oftentimes I think does happen when people come to the opera, because it doesn't. They are relating to a perception of what they think it is, and so many times it's not at all what they imagine it to be. So I'm really happy to hear that story. So thank you for sharing that. The other thing that I wanted to say was we just left Francesca Zambello, but one of the things I think that Washington Opera is doing so beautifully, for example, with the telling of this Scott Joplin piece of Treemonisha, it was very intentional on the part of Washington National Opera that Black leaders tell a Black story. And that's really important. That's really important because, Janae and I both know lots of wonderful directors who have great imagination and beautiful creativity. But there are just some things within the culture that you're just not going to know. You're just not going to know. For example, I don't want to give everything away about what's happening in Treemonisha, but I was having a conversation with Francesca the other day about the ending of a real slow drag, which is a tune that people may be familiar with. And she said to me, anyway, there's a scene that I have where the two protagonists get married at the end, and I have them jumping the broom. And she said, I knew nothing about that. I had no idea about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what that said to me, again, was the importance of, like, who's telling the story? Who's telling the story? And you have to look at Scott Joplin, who in 1910 had dared to imagine to tell a story about Black life, about Black intellect, about Black joy, about Black leadership with a Black woman as the protagonist, when everybody was, did not share that vision. Certainly back in 1910, he had the audacity to imagine that. And it's still relevant today, right? It's an incredible thing, but it was very intentional on the part of Washington National Opera that they wanted to have a Black creative team. And that's what I love. That's what I'm so excited about this, because we've done, this is not my first. I mean, I've done lots of different opera with Black stories that have not had Black creatives at the center. And sometimes you can see that. Yeah. Sometimes I did a production of something. Oh gosh. Anyway, I don't want to get, because I have so much respect for everybody, but there was a choice that one director made in telling this Black story. There was a decision that he made that no Black person would have ever made that choice. Not ever. Not ever.
It sounds like you're talking about cultural competency.
Yes, and also perception. For example, there's in the Treemonisha, the father has a drinking problem. And I called a meeting with the Black men in particular, and I said, how do you feel about this? And how should we address this? Because for so many people, that will be their first and maybe only experience of looking at a snapshot of what they believe to be the Black experience. And so that the voice and how we tell our own stories is of paramount importance, right? Because so many people are getting their information from books, from television, from film, from arts and culture, right? And so there's a responsibility that goes along with the telling of the story too, And I said to Kevin Short, who plays the role of Ned, I said, is this something we want to do? I don't want to show him with we've seen those negative stereotypes all of our lives, right? Do we want to perpetuate that lie? Right? Even though it's a part of the story. Is there another way that we can get around addressing this, right? And so those kinds of things, I don't know that even people with the best intentions who don't come from the experience would
address.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's not the same for sure. And I think that there is a different level of consciousness today that we have amongst directors than we used to have, right? And so I think that people now, at least so many of the people that we know who are working today on the other side of the stage, are trying as best they know how be conscious and intentional about how they tell stories. But I'm saying there's so many fine details that you just could not know unless you were walking in that experience. And that's what's really, really important, I think. And so I'm so excited about that. Now I've forgotten about what the original question was, Harold.
No, no, it's no,
Okay. You were
no,
asking about the art form.
again,
Mhm.
I think when we talk about exposing um, black people to opera, when I mean, let's just be honest, when they say that's a white thing, I don't, I cannot, because they may not have had the Porgy and Bess experience, for example, and their only exposure in mass media about opera may be the fact that
But
the Viking helmets
right.
and
But
and
I mean,
it's in Italian or it's in French. I don't know Italian. I don't know French. So.
right, but if I may say something, I'm going to give a plug for the work that we're doing at the Denise Grace Foundation, and that is about lifting up into rightful prominence those individuals who have built the industry and have contributed to our cultural fabric. At the same time, we invest in the future of tomorrow's artists. Porgy and Bess was not the first Black opera at all. So that's the first thing we have here. Last year or year before last, we had the Edmond de Morgan that was written in 1659. We
Mhm.
talk about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Yes.
That 80 years before him, we had Chevalier Saint George, right? Who they said that Mozart, who was considered anyway, some considered him to be the
Here we go.
anyway, but what I
Mozart was
want to say
certainly
is that
inspired by
yeah,
Chevalier.
he lived 80 years before Mozart writing in that style. So the telling of Black stories and Black life did not begin with Porgy and Bess. Black creatives have been around since the art form has been around. And this is part of our work. This is part of our work in terms of sharing, exposing, and educating people. Because, I certainly I had a teacher when I was at Oberlin College saying to me, what are you doing here? Wouldn't you be better suited, doing a gospel music or something like that? But
Wow.
but I don't even really blame him, because part of the conditioning has been that the lie has been told to everybody. It's been told he didn't know himself. He wasn't taught about Chevalier Saint George. He was not taught about Edmond Dede. Had that been the case, and had he known his music history, which has been intentionally left out, which is the work that we're doing at the foundation, he wouldn't have said to such a statement, right? Because he would have known. But what we're dealing with, we're fighting the erasure of Black history, and that's what it's. Choose the subject, whether that's dance, whether that's theater, whether it's classical music, whether it's science, whether it's medicine, just name it. And we've been left out of the telling of that story. That's the work. I think that the work that our foundation is doing is not around music. I think it's around social justice, quite frankly, because this is an issue that where people don't know, we don't know our American history.
Yeah, and which brings me, this brings me to a question for Janae too, because I don't think that people really understand, even though, as you said, you were raised in the Black church.
Mhm.
I could argue. I'm sure that there were what we commonly call now, African American or Black spirituals. We called them Negro spirituals when I grew up, and um, and that you could also argue that also the spiritual was one of the stepping stones for exposure to opera, to classical music. Was that how you were exposed and how you made the choice to sing opera, or was there something else that I'm missing or don't know?
Well, I certainly grew up in the AME church, and we sang a lot of hymns. And so I remember from a very young age the sound and the timbre of these ladies singing super high. And it wasn't, gospel like Kirk Franklin style CC Winans as we know it. They were hymns that were really, it was classical. They were opera singers as far as I'm concerned. They were classical singers as far as I'm concerned. Maybe most of them not trained, but that for me was always that sound was always for me um, my foundation. So, long story short, I grew up playing piano, classical piano. So,
Okay.
classical piano was always in my kind of life. I was an athlete. I played basketball in high school. I had a coach that was really not nice, and he essentially made me choose. I was in the high school choir, AP choir, and I was also the captain of the varsity basketball team. And he made me choose. And so I said, kind of out of spite, well, I'm going to choose. And so I started really focusing on singing more. And with very little training, I had a teacher, my choir teacher said, you have a gift. Let's hone in on it. So I had a teacher that really kind of identified the gift, because my parents, they knew that I was gifted. They knew I had talent, but it was piano and basketball, the voice. I grew up listening to Motown and gospel and jazz. And so that one teacher identified the gift, and the basketball coach, I was so hurt. I just shifted all of my gears and I said, well, I'm going to focus on this singing thing. And I ended up being accepted to Manhattan School of Music along with some other conservatories. But I went to MSM in New York, and I was still competitive. So I didn't like everyone was so advanced. I just started singing. So I worked really hard, and New York was my playground. So I was buying the cheap nosebleed seats at Carnegie and the Met and Avery Fisher. And I just worked really hard, and I fell in love with it. I like to say that it really did choose me, because I had no aspirations to become an opera singer. Yeah, but it chose me, and I chose it back. So when I got accepted into Curtis for grad school, and that's very competitive. Not everybody gets accepted to Curtis. So when I was admitted, I said, okay, I think I should take this seriously. And then I really, I put my blinders on, and I, did the dirty work, and I just loved it. I mean, it took over my life. And I remember being so moved by Denise in Margaret Garner. I saw you in Margaret Garner. And that was a moment where I was just like, it was the first time that I saw a Black woman live. I'd been studying. I would go to MSM and study all of the DVDs, but live, I saw Denise for the first time, and I was really moved beyond belief, and I felt inspired, and also like, okay, God, you've given me this voice. You've shown me this incredible woman that has moved so many lives. I think this is a sign for me to continue. And so to Denise's point about exposure and presence, it's so important for the next generations to see us on stage, behind stage, in every position, because that really does something. And I'm a testimony, like that. I didn't necessarily, I was kind of going with the flow, but it was confirmed for me that it was really a possibility. So yeah, now I'm starting to be in those positions, and I don't take it lightly. I sing Carmen, and little kids of all ethnicities come up to me afterwards, and their eyes are wide open. They're so bright-eyed, and you can just see how their whole world of possibility is opened, so
I'm gonna have to have that be the last word. Unfortunately, I am out of time, but this has been a joy for me to talk to both of you. Janae Bridges, again, congratulations on your Grammy in the 2026 Grammys. I'm sure you haven't taken it out of the wrapping yet, and and Denise Graves, it is again a goosebump moment for me. Congratulations on your making the transition, the pivot to directing as well, and I'm sure there are going to be great things for for both of you. So, ladies, again, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you for having
joining
us.
Absolutely. That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, March 2nd. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.